Hey team, welcome back. So here we go. We're going to jump into Phylum Chordata. Alright, so this is our last phylum as we're making our way through our animal diversity section. So all the members of this group that we're going to talk about are going to be within Phylum Chordata, but we're going to dive a little deeper into this phylum, talk about some subphylums, some classes, and even some orders as well. So here's a look at where we're going today and in the last set of these videos within Phylum Chordata. So if we recall, this clade right here, they are all related together because they are all deuterostomes. Alright, so Phylum Chordata is all of these organisms right here, from Cephalochordata and down. Those are all contained within Phylum Chordata. But if we remember, echinoderms, the sea stars and urchins, those are also deuterostomes as well, right? So that's why they're so closely related to the rest of Phylum Chordata. But what makes a chordate a chordate? Why are all these organisms so closely related together? Well, chordates tend to have 4 common traits that they share. And these traits may not be present in their adult stage, but they present at some point within their life cycle. Right, so those traits are going to be this notochord right here. So this notochord is in this image right here. This is basically a drawing of an image of a lancelet or amphioxus. And this notochord is a cartilaginous rod that runs the length of the body and provides support to this dorsal hollow nerve cord. Right, so that's where this phylum gets its name, from this dorsal hollow nerve cord. So our dorsal side being our back side, right? This dorsal hollow nerve cord, this is what creates the central nervous system. So the anterior region would be the brain, right? And then the rest of it in us would be the spinal cord. So those are the two of the 4 traits, so the notochord and the dorsal hollow nerve cord. Pharyngeal clefts or slits are sometimes what they're called. Either is technically correct. These are organs that are connected through the mouth that are covered in mucus. Typically when they're present in the adult stage, they're going to be used for filter feeding. And then our last chordate trait, one thing that all members of this phylum have, is a postanal tail, right? But you're like, wait a second. I'm a chordate. I'm part of Mammalia, but I don't have pharyngeal slits. I don't have a muscular postanal tail. Well, organisms in this phylum have these traits at some point in their lifetime, right? So our pharyngeal slits, these are now making up part of our inner ear. They're the tympanic membrane in our inner ear. And then same thing, we did have a tail during our embryonic stages, it's just secondarily lost, right? And then the notochord as well. So we don't have a cartilaginous rod that runs underneath our spinal cord, because our spinal cord is encased in bone, it's encased in vertebra, right? But those discs that are between the vertebra, those cartilaginous discs, that's what's left of the notochord, right? So we have these traits just in altered forms, or we have them at some point in our lifetime, and that's going to be true for all members of this phylum. So we're going to be covering 3 total subphylum: subphylum Cephalochordata, subphylum Urochordata, and then subphylum Vertebrata. So all of these organisms from Myxini to Mammalia, these are all part of subphylum Vertebrata, right? And then we're going to dive in through each of these groups as well as we make our way through. All right, so we'll start first with subphylum Cephalochordata and Urochordata, and then we'll pick up the rest of these in later videos. All right, so here we go. So here's our subphylum Cephalochordata. So that means head cord, basically. These are present in the fossil history before we see vertebrates, and these are the first organisms that we know of to have all 4 of those chordate traits. And what's unique about these is that, unlike a lot of other chordates, they retain those chordate traits in their adult stage. So these are commonly called lancelets, and a typical representative of this group is called amphioxus. And this is why we use this amphioxus or this lancelet as a model to demonstrate those chordate characteristics. Because you can see they have these pharyngeal slits, they have their notochord, they have their dorsal hollow nerve cord, and they have their postanal tail. Right? So these are small little marine organisms. They're typically filter feeders. they're using their mouth and these cirri right here to pump water in, filter feed with using their pharyngeal slits. And then they also use these pharyngeal slits for respiration as well, right? So for gas exchange. There is some research going on in these organisms right now looking at how replication of Hox genes allowed for an amplification of the nervous tissue in the anterior region. That's a fancy way of saying they replicated some Hox genes and that started the development of brains. So there's some research going into what Hox genes do they have and comparing that to other members of Phylum Chordata and how many of those Hox genes have been replicated and which ones that allowed for a massive extensive development of nervous tissue in the anterior region of the brain. So this is subphylum Cephalochordata. So this is an invertebrate chordate, right? So that they do not have a backbone yet, right? So this is not part of subphylum Vertebrata, so this is an invertebrate chordate. All right, so this next subphylum, subphylum Urochordata, it's also sometimes called subphylum Tunicata. There's debate as to which one is more relevant or which term is better. You believe their book calls it Urochordata, but we can also call it tunicate. I would accept either answer on an exam. But their common names, these are also called sea squirts or salp, and these are organisms that demonstrate this idea of not necessarily having all four of those chordate traits in their adult stage, but because they present them in their larval stages, they are considered part of Phylum Chordata. So here's the larvae right here of this tunicate. So we can see it has all of those four chordate traits, and it kind of looks like a weird little tadpole. And then typically after it transitions into its adult stage, it's going to settle down. Most of these are sedentary, with a few exceptions. They typically attach themselves to some sort of substrate, and then they use these pharyngeal slits as a kind of a pump to move water in and use that movement of water in for respiration as well as for filter feeding. And then they pump it out the other side. So they have an in-current siphon and an ex-current siphon. And really the only chordate trait that they have left in their adult stage are these pharyngeal slits. And so this is also an example of what they look like in their adult stage. These are weird little organisms. There's about 2,000, maybe 2,500 species within subphylum Urochordata. Some of them are eaten, but for the most part, they're just weird little animals that hang out on the bottom of the ocean floor. Some of them will connect together and create long cords of individual organisms. We don't really know a whole lot about them. They don't really fossilize well either because they're so soft. So they're just one of those weird little non-vertebrate chordates. All right, so those are our first two subphylum Cephalochordata and subphylum Urochordata. And then we'll jump back in with our subphylum Vertebrata in our next video.